I always knew my sister, Amanda, was the golden child of the family. If you've ever been in a household where one sibling could do no wrong while the other's achievements barely made a ripple, you'll understand the kind of home I grew up in. Amanda was smart, polished, charming, and had a way of wrapping my parents around her finger. She knew exactly what to say to get her way, and my parents adored her for it. Every recital, every award, every minor success was celebrated like she had just changed the world. Meanwhile, James, was always in the background. I wasn't failing, not by any stretch. In fact, I worked harder than Amanda most of the time. I played sports, did well in school, and even took part-time jobs as a teenager to save for college. But in my parents' eyes, Amanda's shine outshined anything I could ever do. When she got into college, they threw her a massive graduation party. When I graduated, they barely managed a family dinner at a chain restaurant. I learned quickly that no matter what I achieved, I would always come second. But the thing is, being ignored has a strange side effect. It makes you tougher. I stopped seeking their approval and started working for myself. By the time I turned 24, I had built up a modest but solid life. A decent job in finance, my own small apartment, and a savings account I guarded like treasure. Still, family is family, and despite the favoritism, I kept some level of connection. I visited home for holidays, called once in a while, and tried to maintain a relationship. But deep down, there was always a wall. That wall started to crack the year my father's health began to decline. He had always been the strong, commanding presence in the house, but suddenly, the man who once seemed untouchable was fragile. Trips to the hospital became routine, and conversations about the future started creeping into our family dinners. One night, as I sat with my dad in his study, he spoke words that burned themselves into my memory.
"James,"
he said, his voice low and raspy.
"you've always been steady. Amanda is bright, but not always careful. When I'm gone, I want to make sure you're taken care of too. That's why I've arranged things in my will. It's fair. Half for you, half for her."
For a second, I thought I misheard. Fairness was not a word I'd ever associated with my family dynamic. But he said it again, half and half. For once, I felt seen. For once, my hard work and loyalty were being recognized. But as comforting as those words were, I also knew something else. Amanda would never accept it. She had been conditioned her entire life to believe she was entitled to everything. To her, I was just the other child. And I was right. Not long after, whispers began. Amanda would drop little comments at family gatherings, saying things like,
"Well, you don't really need much, James. You're single, no kids, no major expenses. I'll be the one taking care of Mom when Dad's gone. It only makes sense I should get more."
At first, I brushed it off as Amanda being Amanda. But as Dad's health worsened, I noticed she was spending a lot of time around him, constantly talking privately with him, helping with his medications, always whispering things just out of earshot. My gut told me she wasn't just being the dutiful daughter. She was working on something bigger. The turning point came at Thanksgiving. While most of the family was busy in the kitchen, I walked past the dad's room and heard Amanda's voice. Low, persuasive, dripping with fake concern.
"Dad, you know James doesn't need as much as I do. You've seen how hard it's been for me with my student loans, with trying to keep up with expenses. James is fine. He'll understand. It's only fair."
My heart dropped into my stomach. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. She was actively trying to manipulate him into rewriting the will. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rage and disbelief churned inside me. It wasn't enough for Amanda to always be the favorite. Now she wanted to strip away the one chance at fairness my father had given me. And I realized something. If I didn't act, she might just succeed. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I wouldn't storm into the study or call her out at the dinner table. Instead, I would wait. I would watch. And when the time was right, I'd be ready to stop her in her tracks. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let Amanda win. The funeral felt unreal. Dad's voice, the one that always filled the house, was gone. And the silence he left behind was heavy, like winter air. People moved around as if on rails. The condolences, the casseroles, the endless stream of relatives offering empty sympathies. Amanda wore the right dress, smiled when people said the right things, and cried at the right moments. It was a performance, and everyone applauded it with pats on the back and little sympathetic nods. I kept my face steady through it all. Dad had trusted me. He told me plainly that his will split the estate equally between Amanda and me. That memory of him, whispering fairness, telling me to look out for family, was the only thing that kept me anchored now. But I also knew how thin that promise could be if people around it conspired to twist it. 3 days after the funeral, I started noticing little signs that Amanda wasn't grieving so much as positioning. She'd be the last to leave a room where someone important sat. She would accidentally bring up money in conversation. She flattered Mom more than usual, lingering in the kitchen to help with dishes in a way that put her alone with Mom for long stretches. Once, I found her flipping through a stack of Dad's mail when she thought no one was watching. It was small stuff, too small if you were trying to be subtle, and yet it added up to a pattern that felt deliberate. Then came the call from Mr. Grant, our family lawyer. I thought he would be the calm voice you hear in moments like this, but his tone was tight, businesslike. "James," he said, "Amanda came by earlier. She asked me to draft a new set of documents. She suggested some alternate language about Dad's intentions. I refused, but she was very persistent. I remember the floor tilting under me. She asked you to change the will?" I asked him. "Not the will itself," he replied slowly. But she tried to persuade me she should have power of attorney and suggested that Dad's wishes might have evolved. It was strange and a little aggressive. I recorded the interaction for the file. "I wanted you to know." There it was, the play I feared. She was testing the edges, probing for anyone willing to assist. The fact that Mr. Grant had marked her visit in the files and told me meant two things. She was bold, and I had an early warning. After that call, the house began to feel different. Amanda was everywhere yet nowhere at once. She'd volunteer to run errands, to take care of things, or to visit medical offices and talk to Dad's doctors. At family gatherings, she'd sidle up to a certain cousin or Dad's longtime friend and whisper something that made them nod slowly. One of Dad's business partners, Martin, cornered me one afternoon and said, "Be careful, James. Amanda's been spinning a story about you. Told a few of us you're young and reckless with money. That's not true, but she's trying to color the narrative." Then came the whispers in the neighborhood, the calls from distant relatives asking if I was sure I wanted to throw away the inheritance or if perhaps I should consider letting Amanda help manage things. Each call was a cold blade. Someone had designed a slow, public campaign to erode my credibility. Their game was to create doubt until people would accept a revision as the sensible choice. I wasn't naive. I knew exactly how these things played out. You plant a seed of doubt, water it with gossip, and then offer the solution. In Amanda's version, she looked like the reasonable daughter who loved her father and therefore should be trusted. It was a perfect con. Except I wasn't going to let her walk through it blind. Mr. Grant and I met more than once. He explained how the probate process worked, how a will could be contested, and how allegations of being unfit or irresponsible could, if they stuck, shift sympathies in a courtroom or a family. But the law loved paper trails. If you have anything you can use, texts, messages, handwriting, witnesses, bring it, he said. And James, if she's trying to get power of attorney, we need to be proactive. Document everything. Don't confront her publicly. Trap her with facts. I started living like an investigator. I saved every message from Amanda that hinted at changes. When she visited Mom, I started recording the exchanges, not to shame Mom or to escalate, but because I needed every little thing that showed intent. There was a text that stuck with me. "You'll see. It'll be better this way. He won't mind once it's done." That one I saved and timestamped. I also went through Dad's paperwork with Mr. Grant's permission. Old ledgers, bank statements, deed transfers, anything that might show financial irregularities or attempts to move money. And then I found something interesting. There had been a series of small transfers from Dad's account to a card that carried Amanda's name for care expenses during his illness. Not illegal necessarily, but suspicious in pattern and timing. I made copies. I printed statements. I documented the dates, the amounts, and the merchant notes. The more I dug, the more brazen Amanda's behavior looked. Once, I overheard her on the phone with a real estate agent, laughing that Dad always wanted Amanda to have the house. It's only fair. Another time, a neighbor told me she'd seen Amanda burning papers late at night in the backyard fire pit. A nervous, furtive motion that made my skin crawl. She was cleaning up trails. That was the moment I realized Amanda might be planning to manufacture consent, create a narrative and then use it as leverage in front of family and, if needed, a judge. If she could get enough people to believe I was reckless, she could argue I was unfit to manage the estate. It was cruel but slick. It would rely on people's willingness to fill gaps in knowledge with comforting assumptions about the golden child. So I changed tack. Instead of confronting, I fortified. I asked Mr. Grant to file an affidavit confirming Dad's original wishes and to secure the will in a way that made tampering impossible without immediate legal notice. He did. He also prepared a list of documents we could use if Amanda decided to push legally. But documents alone wouldn't stop gossip or forge testimony. I needed witnesses. I needed to show the truth of Amanda's behavior to people who mattered, not with accusations, but with evidence. I arranged meetings with 3 of Dad's trusted friends and quietly asked them to be attentive to any unusual claims Rachel might make. I spoke with Martin, who agreed to keep notes. I reached out to a cousin in town and told him to be skeptical if Amanda sounded desperate. It felt like assembling a small, quiet army of truth. One evening, Amanda invited me to what she called a family discussion, thinly veiled as reconciliation. When I walked into Mom's dim kitchen, I could see a few distant relatives already gathered. Amanda sat primly at the head of the table, the picture of heartbreak and earnest concern. She folded her hands and delivered a speech about stewardship, emphasizing how Dad always trusted me with the practical things. One by one, she began accusing me. Not in so many words, but she implied I wasn't suited to manage the finances. Someone asked a question, and I answered calmly. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I produced a copy of Dad's old message to me, a private message he had sent me in a month earlier before he passed away. James, you know how to keep our name straight. I trust you. It wasn't a legal document, but it was a human testament to his belief in me. I read it aloud. In that kitchen, something shifted. Conversations stuttered. The sympathetic nods Amanda had banked on quieted. I took a breath and then, as calmly as I could, outlined the strange transfers, the offers she'd made to the lawyer, the neighbor's citing of her burning papers. I did it without venom. I did it with documents. I let the paper speak. Amanda's face hardened. She looked like someone caught mid-action. She tried to smile and spin the story. Concerned sister again, but the words slid off the evidence like water off glass. By the time the evening ended, Amanda looked exhausted. She left the house with a forced composure, and I watched her go, the shell of the golden child dropping away just a bit. I didn't celebrate. I felt exhausted, but I also felt something else, the small, guarded hope that justice, when backed by facts, could outpace charm. I knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it was the start of a real fight. Amanda would double down. People she'd bribed or persuaded could still shift. But for the first time since Dad's illness, I felt like I wasn't waiting to be swept aside. I had started collecting, documenting, and assembling the truth. And when the moment came to expose the full scheme in a way that would stick, I would be ready. The days after that family meeting were tense. Amanda didn't storm out or go quiet. No, she doubled down. That's her way. If one tactic doesn't work, she doesn't stop. She escalates. I could tell she was angry that I'd embarrassed her in front of Mom and the relatives. She smiled in the mornings, but it was the brittle kind of smile that didn't touch her eyes. I overheard her on the phone, whispering things like, "He doesn't deserve it. I'll fix this." She thought she was being careful, but paranoia makes people sloppy. That's when I knew. Amanda wasn't just going to try to steal the inheritance. She was going to wage a full campaign. If I didn't move first, she'd spin a story so elaborate that people might actually believe her. So I started building my case like a soldier preparing for battle. I reached out to Dad's closest military friends, men and women who had stood beside him when his character mattered more than money ever could. One of them, a grizzled veteran named Paul, told me something that gave me chills. "Your dad used to brag about you, James," he said. "Told me once, that boy's going to be the anchor when I'm gone. Amanda, she's got charm, but James has got backbone." I asked Paul if he'd be willing to share that memory, maybe even in writing. Without hesitation, he agreed. Others followed. Within a week, I had sworn statements, messages, and letters, small fragments of truth that painted the picture Dad had left behind. Remember those strange bank transfers I'd noticed? I dug deeper. With Mr. Grant's help, I traced how Amanda had been funneling care expenses through Dad's account into her personal credit line. At first, it looked like a few $100s here and there, but the pattern stretched back months. Vacations, shopping trips, even tuition deposits for her so-called online courses. The kicker? She'd even used Dad's money to buy herself a designer handbag just weeks before he passed. The receipts were still sitting in her email. I had copies, every single one. I knew Amanda wouldn't stop trying to manipulate family opinion, so I decided to give her just enough rope to hang herself. I asked Mr. Grant to arrange a preliminary family review of Dad's estate, a meeting where both Amanda and I would be present, along with Mom, a few close relatives, and, crucially, some of Dad's colleagues and friends. Amanda thought it was her chance to play the victim and win sympathy. What she didn't know was that I'd already lined up every piece of evidence, every ally, and every witness needed to counter her every word. When the day of the meeting arrived, Amanda walked in like she owned the place. She wore an expensive coat I knew she hadn't paid for herself. Dad's money again. She smiled sweetly, kissed Mom's cheek, and took her seat across from me at the long dining table. Mr. Grant opened with formalities, but Amanda couldn't wait. She jumped in, her voice trembling just enough to look emotional. "Dad loved us both, but James, he isn't ready for this responsibility. He's careless with money, and I've always been the one to take care of the family. I think it's only right that I oversee the estate. It's what Dad would have wanted." I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. I let her dig her hole. She even pulled out a printed budget she'd made, a laughable spreadsheet that painted me as wasteful and her as the savior. When she finally finished, I leaned forward, calm, steady. And then I said the words that shifted the room. "Amanda, I know exactly what you've been doing, and so does everyone else." I pulled out the first stack of papers, the bank statements with her unauthorized transfers. Gasps went around the table as I laid out every payment. The handbag, the vacations, the tuition, all of it funded by Dad's account while he was dying in a hospital bed. Amanda's face paled, but I didn't stop. I read out Paul's statement, describing how Dad had always said I was the one he trusted with his legacy. Then I showed the messages Amanda had sent me, hinting that I'll make it better once it's done. Finally, I revealed something I hadn't shared with anyone before. The neighbor's testimony that Amanda had been burning papers in the backyard late at night. Combined with the missing financial records, it painted a damning picture. First, she tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharp. "Those were reimbursements. You're twisting things." But when Mr. Grant calmly explained that the transfers were not authorized, and that destroying financial records could be considered fraud, the room turned. Eyes that once adored Amanda now looked at her with suspicion. Her charm, her tears, her rehearsed innocence. None of it worked anymore. I looked Amanda dead in the eye and said, "Dad raised us both, Amanda. He believed in fairness. But what you've done, stealing, lying, trying to pit family against me, is unforgivable. You wanted it all for yourself, but you forgot one thing. Dad trusted me because he knew I'd protect his legacy. And that's exactly what I'm going to do." The room was silent. For once, Amanda had no comeback. That night, I went home drained but determined. I knew the fight wasn't over. Amanda would find new ways to claw back, maybe even drag this into court. But the tide had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the story. I was. When Mr. Grant announced the decision, the room was silent. Dad's estate would pass primarily to me. Amanda's attempts at fraud would be documented, and she would be monitored legally for further actions. Any assets she had taken improperly would have to be repaid. Amanda stormed out of the room, her carefully crafted image in ruins. Her friends and colleagues whispered behind her back, and even those who once adored her now kept their distance. As for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The satisfaction came not from humiliating her, but from knowing the truth was out, and Dad's legacy was safe. Later that evening, as I stood by the window looking out at the horizon, Paul clapped me on the shoulder. "Your dad would be proud, James," he said. "You fought with honor just like he did." And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Amanda had tried to steal everything. Instead, she lost the only thing she had left, her credibility. I didn't just protect my inheritance. I protected Dad's name. And that was the real victory.